This conference will now be recorded.
All right, thank you everybody for coming to the webinar today. I'm Ian Little with Camp Happy Days. A few, as my friend asked me to say, a few housekeeping things before we get started here. This webinar is going to be recorded, and you can find it on the COCA YPL website and on the YouTube. This is being brought to you by the Young Professional Leaders Group of COCA. If you're interested in getting involved with that, be sure and shoot us an email. I'll put an email in there for you in the chat box. There are 15 days until the conference, so that's exciting. I've muted everybody to start, and if you do want to speak, you can unmute yourself on the dashboard. If you have any questions or comments, put them in the chat box, and then I will relay those to you as the webinar goes on. But now, as first Halloween pun of the day, for no trick or treat, we have Jack Schott. You like that? And
I like that.
after graduating from the University of Pittsburgh with a degree in industrial engineering, Jack packed up his bags to hit the road with Laura. What they thought would be a month-long road trip turned into 3 years of living on the road, researching summer camps, and learning spaces. They made incredible friends, learned more than they could imagine, and found a talent for speaking and sharing ideas. After years on the road, Jack and Laura founded and now run Stomping Ground, help other organizations better to tell their story online, and continue to work with other camps to bring more kids to better camps. If you think Jack looks familiar, you recognize him from Fargo, and he did the Coke Academy. He also has done a webinar for us before, and he's an enthusiast of the state of Pennsylvania. And with that, I will turn it over to you, bud.
Thanks, Ian. And I'm so happy to be with y'all today. Well, I'm like not with you. It'd be more fun if we were all together hanging out, but we're here now together in this like weird virtual world. I heard an interview a little while ago about this guy trying to explain how he would describe the internet to aliens. He was like, yeah, so everyone just like looks down at these like weird devices. The internet is the world inside there. And I'm happy to say that we get a chance every summer, all of us, to kind of set that world down and play together with kids and people in the real world. And that I think not enough time is spent being able to do that. So thank you all for all the work that you do to make that possible. And I'm excited to get started. So Ian told you a little bit about what I did, but he didn't tell you about this big mistake that we made. So 5 years ago, Laura and I decided we were going to start a camp, and we had this idea that we wanted to treat kids the way they wanted to be treated, which is a cool idea. Sure it is. And we decided and told everybody, kids, parents, staff, that we weren't going to have bedtimes. A lot of you probably just rolled your eyes and laughed at me. That's fine. We had a cool idea. We were going to have some staff that stayed up and some staff that blah. We had all these logistics worked out. And so the way it worked is we had 64 kids at camp for that first week. We rented a property in New Jersey. Like I know many of you are rental camps. And so you know how it is when you're in a new property, you're getting used to it, you're figuring some things out. And we had the kids do what we call embers in their cabins before like at the end of the night program. So they sat around, they talked about the highs and lows, or they did Rosebud Thorn, all those kind of like normal way to kind of close up the night. And then if you wanted to, you could head up to this activity center that was at this camp, and it had an indoor basketball court and some like kind of place to hang out, things like that. And it was the first night of camp, and I'd say 40 of the 64 kids came up to the activity center at like 9:30-ish, you know, when we were wrapping up camp. And we got up there and we were hanging out. We had the staff that were at camp were some of my best friends in the world because they had known that we were starting camp. So they were all trying to like make this dream possible for me and Laura. They were like, yeah, we can do this. Like, you know how awesome volunteers are that really care. Like these people cared so much. We have since not always had always the best people at camp who care this much, but these folks couldn't have cared more. And so we're in this big activity center. We're hanging out. We're getting up to stuff. It's like 9:30. It's cool. And then it's 10:30. I don't know, maybe still 40 kids are there ish. At 11:30, we were down to 30 kids. All right, 10 kids are left. 12:30, 30 kids. 1:30, 30 kids. 2:30, 30 kids. So it's 2:30 in the morning, and Laura looks at me, and our staff are going around like zombies, trying so hard to care. And the kids are like having fun, but you can look around. There's like these 7-year-olds whose like eyes aren't bleeding, but like you could imagine they basically are. They're like zombies, like having fun, but having like all this FOMO about like if they go to bed, they're gonna miss out on something. It's kind of like my first day in college. Me and Ian Aston were talking about a second ago, and so we end up. Laura looks at me and she goes, "All right, Jack, like we got to go to bed. Like, how's this gonna work?" And Scott Arizella was there. You can ask him about it. He's going to be at your conference in a couple weeks. He was there because he was helping us start camp too. He had long since gone to bed. And Laura looks at me and she goes, "We got to put these kids to bed. Like this isn't going to work." And I said, "Yeah. Good point. Good point." And you know how like if you're with somebody that's like more responsible than you can just like wait a second and you know they'll take care of whatever the problem is because they're just like better than you at everything. That's what I definitely did. So I just sat there silently for a second, like, yeah, And then Laura's like, "All right, I'll put them to bed." And I was like, "All right, cool. And so then we gather all the kids in and all the staff, and Laura is brilliant. And we had made this big mistake. And so she says, "Hey, y'all, like, we kind of got to go to bed." And the thing is, it's not like because you all are bad. It's not like not like because you did anything wrong. We made this mistake where like we have the staff that got to get up at 7 a.m. and they can't be up also running camp. So like we're just gonna go. We're gonna close camp down for now, and we'll open it up again tomorrow. And basically all the kids except for one was like, "Yeah, cool." Like my parents would never let me stay up this late. Are you the dumbest people ever? And they just kind of laughed at us. All these kids just laughed at us basically. And then they went to bed, no problem. And in the moment, Laura and I were just like, well, we failed. This is the worst thing ever. We are the worst. And that week was incredibly hard. I don't know if any of you have been at a first week of camp ever, but ours was a disaster in so many ways. The kids had a great time, but I thought I was going to pass out at pretty much every moment from not having thought of the things that I should have thought of and like just running around trying to make so many things happen. And so we had a bunch of problems, but it all kind of worked out. Like the kids had a great time, the staff had a great time, and this next summer will be our 6th summer of running the camp that's called Stomping Ground. Our logo is the one to your face. I think it's to your left. I don't understand if it's going to be mirrored. I don't exactly know how this computer works, but the kind of kid standing with the cape. And we will run. We're going to run our 6th summer, and we're in the process of purchasing a property and trying to kind of get this thing a permanent home. But the big thing that we learned in that moment was that mistakes, we don't want to make them intentionally, but a lot of times the big things that we're scared of aren't that big of a deal if we can just make sure that kids are safe, and that kids most of the time are willing to forgive us, and in a lot of ways we're modeling like really awesome behavior when we can look kids in the eye and be like, yeah, we made the mistake, like I did as the grown-up. I feel like I can't remember a time when I was a kid that a grown-up said to me, "Hi, I made the mistake and I'm sorry." And maybe that's just because I have a weird childhood, but I think that most kids don't hear that most of the time. And so that freed us up, and not in that moment because we were terrified that first summer because we just were running around like chickens with our heads cut off. We were terrified, but it gave us a chance to reflect afterward and say, well, we're not going to make that big of a mistake again, probably. Like we're always going to have bedtimes in the future. And so what kind of little things can we try? And that's pushed us to be willing to try and innovate and try things that are different and change them in the moment. Like when we realize that the schedule isn't quite working, let's just change it and let's do something different. So the first 5 weeks of Stomping Ground ever existing, we never had the same schedule the next week. We would change it from what was going on in the morning to everything changed every time because we realized that we were making mistakes. So now I run Stomping Ground, which is a camp where we try and inspire the next generation of radically empathetic decision makers. It's a mouthful for basically saying we try and give kids a chance to make decisions, mess up, and then work through those decisions in a restorative way, or work through those conflicts that come from making decisions in a restorative way. And last summer we had about 150 kids a week for 6 weeks, and next summer we're hopefully going to run for 8 weeks and see what happens. I also help run what's called the Summer Camp Society with Sarah Kurtz McKinnon, and Kurtz will also be with you in Louisville in a couple of weeks. So say hi and tell her that I said hi. And the Summer Camp Society is basically a bunch of online and in-person stuff where we try and help camps do more awesome stuff. And the kind of like flagship part of that is an online kind of cohort of camp directors from across the country that meet online in small groups, and then we meet for 1 3-day kind of retreat, trying to build connections and kind of inspire each other by sharing the best stuff that we're doing and kind of working through a little curriculum that Kurtz put together. And Kurtz is awesome, and you'll meet her in a couple weeks. So I won't tell you more about her. I want to talk about basically, I came to Aston with a couple of different ideas about what might be a fun webinar to do. I had these like ideas about recruiting staff and doing this other stuff and blah, blah, blah. And he just kind of looked at me and said, yeah, will you just like come and talk about some stuff that you're really excited about, and we'll just like get excited with you and we'll have some fun. And I was like, all right, cool. So what if we did 20-ish ideas that we can fly through pretty quickly, and you might like some of them and you might not like some of them, but hopefully a couple of them inspire you to try something different at your camp. My hope today is not to say, hey, look, do these things. This is exactly how you should run your program, but instead to say, hey, are there some ideas that you might not have thought about, or you might have been a little bit nervous to try, that I can like push you a little bit to take a risk, to try something that's a little bit different and to have a little bit more of a innovative attitude around the programming or around the way you do things. So these are a bunch of ideas. Take the ones that are awesome, change them. Don't give me any credit. Give me credit. I don't care. I hope that you use these to make sure that your camp is more awesome this summer in whatever way that makes sense for you. So use them yourself, change them. If you have questions about any of them, put them in the chat and I'll try and answer them right away, or send me an email, or whatever makes sense to try and make sure that you can do the most awesome stuff this summer. That's what I want to happen. I don't care about any of the other stuff, and I don't care about getting credit or blah, 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 any of that stuff. Just do awesome stuff, change the stuff, make it work for you. Some of this stuff I definitely have written up in kind of longer form stuff. Some of it is this stuff that we tried this summer, and we're still trying to kind of figure out how we're going to push them forward. So let's just get into it. We're going to talk about programming. We're going to talk about some staffing stuff. We're going to talk about some social media stuff, and we're going to talk a little bit about parents at the end. And we're going to try and do all of that in the next 45 minutes. So here we go. We got about 20 ideas. First of all, the cornerstone of our program basically is giving kids choice. And I found that giving kids choice isn't always what you need to do in every situation, and every camp is different. And we have dramatically less drama around so many things when kids have an opportunity to make choices. So we try to give as much choice into our program as possible. And a big part of that is what we call downtown stomping ground. And downtown stomping ground is this part of camp where the way our schedule works is everybody meets up about every hour and hears about the next activities that are going to be happening. And those activities are anything from, we'll talk about that stuff later, but it's your standard activities. They're choosing archery, they're choosing outrageous activities. The last webinar I did with y'all was mostly all about outrageous activities, and I'm sure it's on your YouTube thing somewhere, and Ian can probably post a link if you want more outrageous activities. I think I went over like 50 of them or something that we did. But when we think about outrageous activities, we're thinking about weird stuff that can only happen at camp, all make believe, like Jedi school or those kind of things. But they can choose in our program, they can choose to go to all kinds of different things. And we meet up every hour. The kids have chosen the day before by signing up what they want to go to. The staff that are leading the activity have where they're going. Or who's coming to them, and they're like, oh, okay, Scout, Sierra, Daniel, James, all right, Daquan, okay, we're going to archery, or whoever it is. Or they can choose to go to what we call downtown stomping ground. And downtown stomping ground has the Grove, which is hammocks like this. It has Gaga like that. It has a basketball court is right there as a part of it. It's got what we call the maker space, which is just an arts and crafts building where kids can make whatever they want in the maker space. So we don't have any fancy tools or anything like that. Am I missing something? And it has what we call the Fungin, which is basically a bunch of magic cards and board games and Legos. It's kind of like a cool basement that kids would like hang out in, but it's just in a cabin. It's not in a basement. And it also has an adventure playground. We're going to see that in a second. And so anyway, downtown stomping ground is the quad of camp. It's the free play area, free time. They can come out and hang at different times. And my suggestion here is pushing you to say, hey, could there be some times where you could add some kind of downtown stomping ground style thing to your camp, downtown sunshine, downtown whatever it might be. In downtown stomping ground, there's the adventure playground. The adventure playground is, adventure playgrounds are these ideas that we took from Europe. There's one on Governor's Island in New York, and there's one in the Bay Area that Laura and I visited on our trip. And basically, there are a bunch of tools and hammers, nails, saws, and wood that kids can build things out of. And it ends up looking like something like this with a bunch of junk wood and things like that. You can see, oh, that is what happens when I move things. Okay, wait 1 second. We're back. You can see the rules for our adventure playground are there. Wear closed-toed shoes, create things, don't cut down trees, no throwing, and put tools back in the box. So we open it sometimes, and kids can go in and kind of get up to their own stuff. I'll post. I had a plan to play some videos here, but I'm nervous. I was nervous about the technology not working. So I'll post a video about downtown stomping ground and about adventure playgrounds, or I'll send them to Ian and Aston, and they'll figure out how to send them all to you so you can see those kind of things about what happens in those spaces if you're more interested in them. What else we got? So yeah, these are kids hanging out in downtowns, or in the adventure playgrounds, as part of downtown stomping ground, building stuff, making things, kind of getting up to stuff. I mentioned outrageous activities a second ago, but I wanted to touch on them if you hadn't seen any of the stuff that we did before. Outrageous activities are basically a time where kids opt in to go on some form of make-believe adventure. This one is hot dog school. I don't exactly know what happened during hot dog school, but they wore a bunch of costumes and went around and pretended to be hot dogs in some way. The way that outrageous activities work for us basically is they tend to work in the same way. And they start by kids getting in costumes, going on some form of walk to a specific place, doing some form of like kind of slightly strange activity, but mostly just it's a normal activity that's themed a little bit weird. So I think in this situation, they're throwing wet sponges at a piece of butcher paper and trying to break through it. But they're doing it with funny accents as if they were hot dogs, because of course hot dogs have funny accents. And then they go to another place and do the same thing. And what we try and do is give our staff a little sandbox to play in that they can use to create these kind of fun and silly opportunities. And the way that works is we say, we're going to do an outrageous activity. Y'all have, you're going to get on the schedule for an outrageous activity, make something up, be silly. So if the people are not that confident in that idea, we sit with them and try and come up with what would be like a weird thing. What are you into? What do you want to try? And most of the time, it turns out by the end of the summer that not everybody runs outrageous activities, because we have some staff that are great. Like, this is Casey. He's so silly and funny and energetic and loud, and he's great at outrageous activities. And we have other staff who are incredible staff who just aren't that gregarious. They don't kind of command the kind of attention in a silly way that Casey might. And they're great at a lot of other things, but we just won't put them on outrageous activities. So that's kind of outrageous activities. Another wackadoo little thing we do that you might have seen other folks do is we call them shaving cream wars. And basically, we mark off the soccer field and say, when you're inside these cones, we're going to have shaving cream going on. And the staff get bottles of shaving cream, fill up kids' hands. We play a lot of music and have a big dance party where kids have shaving cream. They go around and put it on each other and kind of do each other's hair and things like that. Our rules for shaving cream war are basically, if you're in the shaving cream war zone, you're consenting to getting shaving cream put on you. Don't put it in anyone's eyes or mouth or nose, so stay away from the face, basically. And don't, if you're going to be a part of shaving cream, you got to get cleaned off before going and doing other stuff. And we usually have like Gaga going and the Grove, which is right there, where kids can hang out if they don't want to be a part of the shaving cream war. Then we play a bunch of music, and then they get rinsed off, and then shower after that. Am I missing anything about shaving cream wars? I don't think so. Going this fast, I forget things. So if I miss something, just like stop me. I'm going to try and keep going fast, because I think that the speed helps us kind of fly through this stuff and doesn't waste your time. But I also know that going this fast, it can be confusing. So please, if you have questions, just go, hey, Jack, slow down. Give me something here. One of the easiest things that I would do to any program that I was running would be to add a costume room that kids can go into a place that is pretty central to camp. So the way that we do it is we just have a costume room where there's a bunch of costumes hanging up, and we always have in there tempera paint with shampoo. So I don't know how many of y'all do this, but if you mix tempera paint and shampoo, it comes off of any face or arms or whatever a lot easier. And so in our costume room, we keep paint and kids never go into the costume room without staff or anything like that. So they're never unsupervised in there to kind of like create a mess. It gets messy, but it's usually messy because of the staff. But have a costume room, they're incredible. And at the end of every night, we do a big night program, and many of you probably do something similar, but I just wanted to talk about a couple of the ones that we do to maybe inspire some thoughts. This one is a really simple casino night. We keep in a box in our dining hall, we keep a whole bunch of fake money that we make, cards, dice, and those kind of things. And we have them ready for if it's thunderstorming, we can pull them out and have a casino night. The way they tend to happen is kids come in, they hear that it's going to be a casino, and then in the foyer of the dining hall, which is kind of right next to this, there are set up buckets with things that kids can put their money into. And so they go around and they play casino games. We rig all the casino games, so essentially kids are going to win more money, and then they can take their money and put it into buckets. Those buckets sometimes they have like all camp pizza party. Sometimes it's the bucket that has the most money in it wins the prize, and sometimes it's like a this or that. And so there'll be two buckets next to each other. One is throw Jack in the lake, one is throw Laura in the lake. and kids can bet which one they want to do. We always, of course, ask staff if we're going to do something goofy, like throw them in the lake, beforehand. But then kids go around, make some money in the casino, and then go they can bet, or they can invest their money in what they want to do. And that's about casinos. Well, one of the things we started doing with these is we have 12 passenger vans that we use on site, and so sometimes we have a secret thing going on at a different location, and kids can earn a little ticket to be able to go into the van and then get taken up to a different building. So they're still inside the whole time, but they can go to a different building where there's like free lemonade or kind of something else silly going on in it with a different theme. And that's how we do casino nights. This is a picture of a game called Fortress, and I have this written up, so if you just send me an email or maybe send you but the way forward works is get into about it could, for us, we choose not to do my thing stop working. We choose not to do it by cabin, but absolutely it could go by cabin. What's going on? Sorry, technical difficulties. We choose not to go by cabin, but you absolutely could go by cabin. And as a cabin group or a group of people, you go around and you get a bucket of sponges and a backpack, and you wear a sash of a different color. And there's 3 different colors, and on each different colored team, there might be 3 to 6 different groups that are green, blue, red, whatever it might be. And if you encounter a group of a different color, you can battle them. And if you defeat them in a battle, you get to take what is in their backpack. And the goal is to go around and collect as many tennis balls as possible and bring them back to your central bank. And we keep the bank in the same spot, so everybody comes back to the same spot. And we throw tennis balls all over camp. Kids go in their groups. They have to stay as a group. They go around and collect the tennis balls and put them in their backpack and bring them back to the center and dump them. The battle looks like this. The counselor that's leading each group would yell, "Battle Maggie." That's Maggie squatting right there with the flowers painted on her face. "Battle Maggie." And then those 2 would battle. And the way battles work is you have the wet sponges and you throw them at each other just like dodgeball, but without like kind of that center line. You can kind of go as much as you want around the outside. And if you get hit by a sponge, you take a knee. The last team with someone standing gets everybody's tennis balls. What am I missing? That's all the things that are true about Fortress. The 3 things about that are kind of other things. Balls are free if you call your local tennis club. Almost all of them are just giving away tennis balls all the time because you can only use tennis balls for serious tennis a few times before they have to get thrown away. And so they have tons of them, and they're looking for reasons to give them to nonprofits or other things. So call them up. You can get free tennis balls. We use tennis balls as a million things in a million games because we have, I don't know, 10,000 of them at this point. 2, we use a ton of grout sponges to do instead of water balloons and other things, and we use them for a ton of programming. And what we do is we buy grout sponges from Home Depot or Amazon, and I bet that there's hardware stores that would donate them to us, but we haven't found them yet. And grout sponges come maybe 8 inches by 6 inches, something like that, and we cut them up into about 8 sponges, 6 to 8 sponges, depending on who does the cutting, and then we use those little fist size sponges to throw and use for a million things. And then the same thing is true of all of those sashes that you see kids wearing wrapped around their head or over their around their body. Those are just fabric that we've cut up, and we use that for everything. So we just buy a ton of rolls of fabric and then use it for sashes and that kind of stuff instead of having, I don't know, like flags or expensive stuff. We do almost nothing that's expensive. Cool. The last thing we do that's like a very standard night program, that's an easy one that you can come up with, and your staff or your program director would probably be great at dreaming up ideas for, is like a carnival. We call it an open camp, and we basically just put stations out around a field and make up a bunch of goofy stations for kids to participate in. One of my favorites is we take mattresses and put them in a pile of 3 kind of camp mattresses, and we do what we call mattress flops, where kids just run and then belly flop onto the mattresses, and they lead to some of the best pictures of the summer. And it's really silly, but it's just kind of one of the stations that we do. And Aston and Ian, remind me, and I will put a link to a whole bunch of stations that we have written up that might be useful. I looked at the notes that y'all put in when you signed up. So I think there was maybe 7 or 8 questions, and so I just wanted to take a minute and answer them. They're written there. These 2 are basically the same thing, the same question, which is about age group specific activities and how do we make that more awesome. Is it better to separate older kids and younger kids? Is it better to keep them together? How do we balance all of that? And I think there's a lot of different answers to this question. A lot of camps do what they call progressive programming, where 8-year-olds can do something, and then maybe by the time you're 10, you get new opportunities to do new things. And the idea is that that helps kids want to come back to camp because they didn't get to experience everything. And I think that there might be some truth to that. I'm nervous about doing that too much because most of the things that we offer at camp, kids, most of the activities specifically that we could withhold from kids until they're older, kids could find a different place to do them. So it may not have been the case 30 years ago that kids could find high rope somewhere else and maybe camp was the only place they could do it, but now you can do it all over. And so I think kind of like iTunes killed the album in many ways, I'm afraid of having too much progressive programming because I think kids can find all of that spunk in a different place. Just like in music, you can find the one song you want on Spotify as opposed to having to have the whole album. So we don't have a ton of progressive programming. We don't have a ton of kind of segregated by age groups, but we do have some because I think there are some really cool opportunities for older kids to get up to older kid stuff and younger kids to get up to younger kid stuff. And before we get into that, I want to say, kind of from a philosophical standpoint, with this kind of stuff, I think there's a ton of opportunity for older kids to learn from younger kids by being their leader and by being their mentor, and a really cool opportunity for younger kids to learn from older kids where we are old enough and kind of different enough from young kids that we may seem unattainable to them, or we might not seem cool. Whereas like a 3rd grader hanging out with a 7th grader has so much respect for them in so many ways because they're like, oh my gosh, you're almost like me, but you're kind of still cool. You're like amazing. And you all know that about watching your younger kids look up to the older kids at camp, and you kind of look at some of the older kids and you're like, those kids don't seem that cool. But the younger kids don't know that, and they love them so much, right? So finding ways to have some of that mixed age, whether it's playing basketball or soccer or doing more specific like buddy programming, I think is really powerful. And I think that one of the things that we try to do is kind of explain that mostly to parents before the kids come to camp, that's one of the things that is going to happen at camp. It's one of the opportunities that kids are going to have, is to spend time with older and younger kids. Because when we can get out in front and explain that, we can kind of change some of those survey results. We can kind of prime people for the excitement when they kind of get to camp. So I think that we try another opportunity that is available for teens at camp is to start to be leaders of different kind of programs. So can we get 13 to 15-year-olds to play the zombies in a program where they're just kind of running around and tagging kids? And can we hype them up around that being an exciting activity? So they're still doing the activity that everybody's doing, but we've kind of changed their role in it a little bit so that more people are kind of involved in it. Where else am I? I think that the big question here is when we think about different age groups, we can think about the activity that's happening and who might not be that excited about it. So for us, Fortress that I just explained, older kids tend to love, some younger kids get overwhelmed by. And so can we either, or campfires at Stomping Ground, the middle group of kids tend to really love, the oldest kids tend to not love our jokes as much, and the youngest kids tend to like not like sitting still for that long. And then counselor hunts, which are what we do for counselor hunts, is very similar to Fortress. Is there's a group of kids that go around looking for counselors that are dressed in a specific theme all over camp. So kids are supervised the whole time. I think kind of the classic counselor hunt, like from the 80s, is like kids just like go out and try and find counselors. We don't do anything where kids aren't supervised, so that doesn't work for us. New York State would have us shut down if we did. So kind of being supervised, but being able to go find counselors who are dressed up in silly costumes tends to be more fun for younger kids. And so when we think about these kind of age segregated programs, or if we're going to do all camp programming, what does that look like? Is do we want to change the program to be better for the different age groups? So what can we do in Fortress to make it more accessible for younger kids? Can we have maybe an extra counselor with the younger kids and one less counselor with the older kids? Can we do some like sneaking by people instead of having to battle in a sponge war, because the younger kids, we've noticed, like sneaking more and it's like not as overwhelming? What are some things we can change about the program to be better suited, kind of like individualized learning for the younger kids or the older kids? Can we throw in some more sophisticated but still totally appropriate jokes into campfire to keep the oldest kids connected? Could we give them a different role? Those kind of things. Or do we want to change who's at the program? Like, do we want to separate into different age groups and do different programs at different times? And I don't think there's a right answer to when to do any of those things, but diagnosing what are the parts that kids of different age groups will love or not love in general. And I'm speaking with like the broadest brush right now, because of course there are 15-year-olds that love the silliest kind of like classically young kid activities, and there's young kids who love the kind of like more older kid activities. Of course that's true. And if we can give them some choice on where to be, I think that goes a long way. And if we can't, what can we do to modify what's going on to be more inclusive of those different groups based on kind of their interests and what tends to excite them? So the question is, do we change who's at the activity, or do we change the activity itself? All right, I want to talk a little bit about staffing and volunteers, and first go with some rapid fire stuff on seasonal staff, and then a little bit on working in we are now a remote team where often I'm in Saratoga. We've got two folks here in Rochester most of the time, and Laura's in New York City. So I know a lot of you do this too, where you have not really a central office where everybody on your year-round team can meet up. So I want to talk about some things that we're trying to do to make that a little bit easier. And by no means are we experts in it, but kind of just giving you some stuff we're excited about, and we're trying to make some stuff work. So this one is about seasonal staff. We do Zoom calls before the summer And the way that works is every Monday in May, we are available for a hangout from, I don't remember what we did last year. I think it was maybe 8 to 9 every Monday in May. And if you wanted to, you could jump on the Zoom call, and we had a little agenda getting you ready for coming to camp. We didn't make it mandatory. We had maybe 50% participation. We primed the groups by calling some of our kind of strongest returning staff and getting them to be on the call, so that it had already the kind of like cultural feel of camp, and it wasn't just like me explaining things the whole time. If you don't know what Zoom is basically a version of this. We were clowning about it right before this whole thing started, and it's like a group chat, kind of a Zoom GoToMeeting version, or Skype or Google Hangouts, those kind of things. We use Zoom. Use whatever you want. But one of the nice things about Zoom is that it lets you break the group up into what they call breakout rooms. So we would have sometimes as many as 30 people on the call, and having 30 people try and talk at once is a nightmare. But a huge part of what we wanted to do was get people to talk to each other. And in Zoom, what you can do is say, like, create 10 breakout rooms, and you'll have 3 people or 10 people or 5 people, whatever you decided, be broken into groups and then kind of like sent into a new window as if they were going into a different room, right? And that lets those 5 people or whatever start to talk to each other, and then we can bring them back into the group of 30 and then send them back into smaller groups. And the reason we did that is when we run the Summer Camp Society, we do Zoom calls every week for 6 to 8 weeks, and we talk about all kinds of stuff. And then we do an in-person retreat. And what we found is that relationships really were built in those repeated online meetings, that were like, they weren't the same as kind of friends that you make in real life, but they sped up the ability for people to become friends in a faster way. And so by having these pre-summer Zoom calls, they went out, they did their thing. Then when they got to camp, it didn't take 3 days for them to become friends with new people. It took maybe a day for most people, or depending on the different people. But it kind of accelerated that. So I love that, and we'll keep doing that. And we do them basically where we theme them all with a topic. So maybe it's packing for camp. What are you stressed about? Like, whatever the things are that we decide that year that we think the staff might want to know about, and we try and help them do that. So for us, they aren't so much like we need to talk more about behavior management at camp, so we're going to try and like cram in some extra training time. We use them entirely for community building, and with that in mind, we're trying to solve problems that our staff might be stressed about before they come to camp. During staff orientation, something that we've noticed is when we would talk to our staff, the thing that they love the most about camp are the community, which we just talked about. So we want to do a lot of community building, and 2, the impact and kind of accomplishing things. And I think that most of our volunteers come to camp because they want to make a difference. And then they get there, and during staff orientation, the huge chunk of it, whether it's a week or 3 days, or we've done anything from 3 days of orientation to 10 days of orientation, depending on the year. And almost always that time is spent with them kind of listening or doing what we are hoping for them to do. And almost none of it is giving back right away. And so that's a weird dichotomy, because they're coming to camp to give, and then they get there and they have to take and they have to learn, which we have to learn. And I get that. We need to get through some things. But can we give them jobs early to help them start to fill that like competence bucket, to be motivated? We love the theory of motivation that's the self-determination theory, and that's that people are motivated when they are autonomous, they feel like they belong, and they feel competent. So can we fill that competent bucket by giving them jobs early? So we let people sign up before they get to camp to be the DJ for the day. So they walk around with a speaker and they play that in between sessions, to help with dishes, to these people are learning the camp song so they can teach it to people later. Can we give them those jobs early? And then can we give them choice in the activities that they're going to, or the learning that they're going to? The way we did that this summer is that all morning, each day, we had 3 different learning options where they could choose to go to in-depth homesickness, whatever the things that we needed to learn are. And if there was something that we knew we needed everyone to learn, we just snuck that into every session. So everybody needs to learn about active listening. We can talk about active listening in 100 different ways, and we can do it through the lens of music. We can do it through the lens of whatever. So can we give them choice in their schedule? I'm happy to send you our training schedule if that's helpful. I got to speed up. So these are the things that we do we're trying in the off season as kind of disparate groups of year-round staff or year-round volunteers. And one of them is every Wednesday, we do a deep dive meeting where somebody is the owner of the meeting. It could be our assistant director, it could be our development person, it could be me. And you get the whole year-round team to care about whatever the thing you're working on is, and we all try and help you get it done. So last week we were talking about staff onboarding. That's what our assistant camp director wanted to talk about, and she led a meeting for an hour where all we did was brainstorm about how to do better staff onboarding for this summer. And next week we're going to talk about running our annual appeal, because that's what our development director wants us to talk about. They run the meeting, they get our input for an hour. There's no updates about like, hey, let me tell you about what happened with this meeting or how we're trying to do this. It's all about one project. How can we drive that one project forward? And a different person runs it every week. I lost my internet for a second, but I don't know why. Here we go. Friday, what we do is everybody writes up what they did that week. And some people do it in bullet points, and some people write kind of a narrative form. But in general, the idea is that in Slack, which is a chat app that I recommend highly using because it keeps emails out of your inbox with internal stuff. Everybody on Friday posts a update. This is what I did this week. This is what I'm working on for next week. So we have really simple accountability for what's going on. And as the supervisor, you can look back and say, hey, Wyatt, like you said you were going to get this done and you didn't. So we do this with our year-round team, those 3 things to get things moving. The question here is counselor-only activities, tie-dye. Basically, how do we increase retention and give staff more freedom? Which I think is a great question. And I have kind of 3 different answers, 3 different ideas. But first, I think the first idea is that staff, in my experience, return when 2 things are true. When they build strong relationships with somebody else that's going to be back. That could be you, or it could be other returning volunteers or staff. And 2, when they feel valued and feel like they're making an impact. When those 2 things are true, I feel like our staff return, unless there's other things going on in their life, like people can't because they have a different job, they move, all that is true. But the highest likelihood of people returning come back to being valued, feeling valued, because I think we do value them no matter what, but they have to feel it. And then 2, if they build what they think is a strong connection to somebody else that will be back there that summer. For me, we can do a lot of things to try and help them build a lot of relationships. But one of the relationships I know I have the most control over is, can I build relationships with them personally, which is really hard. But how can I change my schedule a little bit to increase the likelihood that I can spend more time with more people building more relationships? And I can value that, and I can build an ROI on why the math and the money works on that, my time, blah, 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 if you want, or just we can try and build better relationships. 3 ideas for retaining staff. 1, building relationships. Can we do some year-round staff events? A couple of easy ones that we do that are also really value added is, can they help us run some events that we're doing, or can I ask them to help us make videos? So we just create random events in our little hometown where a bunch of our staff are from to make a video. Then we use that video on social media or whatever, but it gives an excuse for people to get together, and it gives us value. So make some videos, go to Sky Zone. We go to New York and Philly to recruit kids every year. Can I get a bunch of staff to come with me, and we rent a big Airbnb and then have a weekend where everyone's clowning together and getting up to stuff, but they kind of return every year. And we do a similar thing where our camp director and I go visit staff in college. A lot of our staff come from local colleges and things like that. But can I go meet them, buy a bunch of their friends pizza, and then get those folks to come back and try and help us recruit staff? We have mixed success recruiting staff in those environments, but the staff that we go and buy pizza with and give to their friends almost always come back. So it works as retention, but I'm not sure it always works to recruit new staff. So that's year-round stuff to help retain staff. Second one, at camp, what can we do? One of the things that I like is asking camper parents to buy pizza or ice cream or something like that for all the staff. So one night they come up to the dining hall and there's just 15 pizzas that the staff can just eat that somebody bought. I haven't tried this, but I think it would be really fun to figure out how could we do half of staff could go bowling on Wednesday night, and then half of staff could go bowling on Saturday night or something like that during camp. It'd be very strange and weird for me, but I kind of like the idea. I'm going to try it. Our friend Dan Weir used to run Frost Valley in New York, and what he would do is he would walk around and pick a village and grill steaks in the village with the staff that were in that village on duty that night. Which I love. It's like this very strange, kind of bizarre thing to have somebody show up with steaks and eat it at camp, but it would be really fun to do. You say somebody asked about freedom, and we haven't figured this out yet, but I think I'm going to try again this summer. Is can we figure out how to let staff sign up for more of the activities that they want to lead? So could we just post that we're going to be having free time after dinner, and the staff are going to have their different zones? Could they sign up to, I'm going to run basketball, you're going to run canoeing, whatever the things that are open are, instead of them being assigned? I would love to do that. And then, like I said, the staff, some of the staff are going to come back because they love you. I think you can own that. I think that it's hard to admit that, but definitely there are staff that come back to Stomping Ground because of me, not all of them, and it's not entirely because of me, but if there are some that's true for, can I help that happen more? And so can I do stuff that I love? So I really like playing basketball at camp. Can I put together a basketball game that the staff that like playing basketball can come play basketball with me? And this is like a different approach than a lot of this is like a little bit of a different approach than this first one, which is like, can we buy pizza for everyone? Can we kind of give the same experience to everyone? And instead think about, can my whole leadership team work on a few different things to reach as many staff as possible in a kind of more individualized way? So Laura, who I run camp with, hates basketball. She would never play basketball with the staff, but she helps them do tie-dye. She does kind of more art focused stuff with them that can build a relationship. And Clee, who helped us run camp, is really big into dance. So she leads like some dance stuff with people or makes up dances with staff. Can we think about, can I try and reach almost all of staff or all of staff in different ways as opposed to the same kind of like, I'm going to do one thing and have it reach everyone? Okay, last thing about recruiting staff, and I learned this from our friend Sylvia, and it's going to sound silly, but basically give them stuff. Can I write them notes? Can I buy really simple gifts? Can I send them a picture of them playing with kids at camp during the off season? Can I send their parents, if your staff are younger-ish, thank you cards for how awesome their kids are? There's kids who are my staff. But can I give them things? I love getting mail. A lot of people don't get much snail mail besides bills. And so can we give them things during the rest of the year, or even at camp. It feels so good to get a note, and I sometimes undervalue the ability. I undervalue me just writing a quick note to my staff, to an individual on my staff. Hey, Dylan, I loved seeing you do whatever. I think those little things, again, like very individualized approach as opposed to like a sweeping, everybody gets the same thing kind of style. Right. I want to talk about social media. Ian, how am I doing on time? We're gonna fly here. Okay, social media. I think social media is the new way to talk about word of mouth, and it's the best way to recruit camper staff and medium to small donors. We do a day of giving every year where we make a bunch of videos and ask everyone to donate money on the same day, as opposed to doing like a long campaign during the year. You can see our day of giving from last year. It was June 1st. We'll do another one this year. But we stole it from colleges. So if you search day of giving fundraiser online, you'll see a million resources for how colleges are doing it. And it works really well to leverage social media to bring in some money. We run a staff appreciation week every year. We're big on weeks or days or specific like events online, as opposed to kind of like every Monday we post the same thing, or trying to build that kind of a plan. I find that if we can have an event going, it's better to almost post nothing for a week and then post a bunch of stuff the next week, as opposed to kind of trying to have like the same drip come out all the time. So staff appreciation week, or we're going to run a restorative justice week in a few weeks. When we want to market a specific program, we'll do that for a week. Every day, a video comes out, a blog post comes out, something like that. We do a lot of letting our staff take over our Instagram stories. That stories are big right now, blah, blah, blah. We make a lot of vlogs when we go places. This is one of the lowest hanging fruits I think that you probably have, which is if you watch a handful of vlogs on YouTube, you can have like an understanding of the style of how it works, so you can record some of it. And then what we do is when we go to a conference or we have an event, we nominate one of our staff to run the vlog, and they record everything, and we send them to another one of our seasonal staff who didn't work with us last summer but still does this for us, and she makes a video for us for like $50, and then we post that, and it kind of personalizes what camp is kind of like. And a lot of this is that the key to social media in 2019, in my opinion, is just content, and not worrying about like trying to have like specific memes or things like that. But can we create things that people will think are interesting? So can we write blog posts about what we care about at camp and who we are? Can we make vlogs that are fun and interesting? And can we do it in a way that doesn't take us too much time? Because I don't have the time to dream up really cool ideas all the time, but can I document what's happening as opposed to creating what's happening? And the last thing about social media that I want to say is, can we get more photographers and videographers to camp? In particular, the thing about camp is that it's basically a music festival or a wedding or those kind of things. So can we get more people to document it so we can do a better job of telling those stories later? We only have a week or 2 weeks or whatever to capture everything, to be able to share that for the rest of the year. That is what I wanted to talk about today. That's about 20 things that are kooky and silly that we do at our camp that might be useful to y'all. Like I said at the beginning, I am 1,000% available to talk or share some ideas. If you need anything, just email me or text me and we can make this happen. Thank y'all so much. I love what y'all do, and I wish I was going to be in Louisville with you in a few weeks to have a little bit of fun and get better at stuff. But you guys are awesome. Ian, what do we do now?
Well, a couple quick things. First of all, thank you. You definitely gave us pumpkin to talk about, and you always creep it real. So there's three for the day. We are super, super grateful for you, Jack. And we've got your last webinar up. We'll be sure to put this one up. There's our social media. We have linked to this in the chat, and we've also got the form for evaluations of this. And we are super excited. Conference is in 15 days. Make sure you are registered, and we will see you soon. And we'll make sure to get all the information that Jack talked to you about today available. So awesome. Thank you, man.
Y'all the best. Ian, thank you so much. Aston, thank you. Everybody else, Jennifer, thank you for saying the nice things in the chat. You all are so cool, and I love what you do, so keep it up.
Awesome, man. Take care.
Take care.